Thanks for taking the time to download this BBC Radio 5 Live podcast. To search for other podcasts you might like, click bbc.co.uk/5live, where you'll also find our terms of use.
So now it's time for a chat with our intrepid web wonderling. Jamila is here, and it must be time for Outriders. Jamila, what's on the menu this week?
Hello, Giles. This week we're going to find out how India and Bangladesh are battling online, learn more about an emerging alternative network, and look ahead to what we might be as humans with a few extras.
How exciting, very intriguing. All right, let's start with our outriding friends on the Asian continent. Now, relations between Bangladesh and India have been tense in the past, to say the least, especially in border territories. But apparently it's not just geographical borders where these disputes arise.
Quite right. Online, Indian and Bangladeshi hackers have been closing down websites in attacks and counterattacks in what some are calling a cyberwar. Already the stock market, commercial and political websites have all been brought down and come back up again in some cases, and there's no certainty whether either side are actually going to stop doing this anytime soon. Avik Sharkar is in Kolkata, where he's a cybersecurity journalist and ethical hacker. He's been following the battle on his site, Voice of the Grey Hat, and I asked him to explain it all a little bit further.
Some Indian guys threatened the Bangladeshi hackers without any reason. This is just a personal ego from where it started. And later it has become a very, very phenomenal issue for India especially, because Indian government has been hit several times, media and NIC and lots of government server has been repeatedly compromised every day. Along with that, stock exchange has been hit and it was DDoSed for several times. India has lost very, very precious websites. Along with that, some political websites get hacked. And if the stock exchange get down in the peak hours, it will lose millions of dollars for India. It is truly, truly dangerous for India. And still, I am very much uncomfortable that why government is not taking it seriously.
What was the first attack on Bangladesh for? What was the point that they were making?
The whole stuff started with ego challenge. Later, it became like a cyber war, and they are demanding something from the Indian government. Because now, if you look past few days, you will find the attack is coming on behalf of Bangladesh only. India is not responding their attacks. Okay, and they are claiming that the Indian BSF, the Border Security Force, is torturing the Bangladeshi people in the border. So they are saying that Indian government must have to say that we are doing something illegal, we are doing something wrong, and you have to say sorry and something like that. Now it's become a national issue. But I don't know what they are claiming with this so-called cyberwar. This is just publicity stunt, that's all.
What is it that they gain by doing this? Because when websites go down, people do not like the people who do this very much at all.
Actually, the thing is that those guys are mainly teenagers, school guys, and hardly college. Okay, so while they are doing all these stuffs mainly for fun, first of all, and later few guys misguided them for their personal profits. Say you hit websites and I am the security guy. Say if you hack the website, I will pay you, and thus our company will earn something from the government, and like that.
Do you think, in which case, if it's identifiable who the people are who are doing this, are they not worried about the repercussions, about whether they'll get arrested?
I have earlier told you that our government, the Indian government, is very careless about the cyber war and the cyber security. They are simply careless. NIC is a very sophisticated part in Indian cyber security. And when NIC and media getting penetrated several times, still they are careless, and yet they didn't say anything to the media, an open press conference or something like that. They simply careless. But I love to appreciate the Bangladesh government. They are taking it very seriously.
How much of Indian society do you think is aware of what's going on? Because if you're not connected to the internet all the time, maybe you might not notice this so much.
Actually, still the society. I hope the society is not too much aware of what is going on, because it's still on the social media and the website based. Because live channels hardly cover the story. If I'm not too wrong, I have seen 3 or 4 coverage maximum. So how the common people will come to know? Because all the people are not aware of the internet. Okay, so normal people is still unaware of what is going on in the war, and what kind of damage we are facing, what kind of challenge is hitting India, something like that.
Are the hackers in Bangladesh showing any sign of stopping yet?
No, nothing, because I have told that government is careless, and it's come on side of the politics base. Political parties are also getting involved because the political sites get hacked. There says that they have registered complaint to the cyber cell and something like that. They will take steps. Nothing else, just time pass. Still, India is careless about this cyberwar.
What do you think that they should be doing then to either try and stop the attacks or to raise awareness? Because even if you tell people that a website has been hacked, if you don't use the web, it doesn't always seem that important.
I think first of all, they should have a discussion. Both the government, first of all, should discuss. And if Bangladesh is hitting Indian sites and if Indian hackers counter attack, then what will happen? These skiddies jobs will continue and continue. There is no end. But I think now it's the time to both government to have a discussion about these things and stop these things, because this is when someone is hacking website or defacing the page, it is against the reputation, hitting the financial department and causing lots of damage. But as per my view, they should have discussed. They should discuss both the hackers community and the others, and also the government should discuss. They should at least take it carefully.
So if we'd like to read more of this on your site, where I've been reading the reports, where's best to find you online? What's the URL?
It's voiceofgreyhat.com.
Avik of voiceofgreyhat.com doing well to highlight the impact of hackers in his region. Now, as we know, hackers are not all about taking down sites and cracking security. They also work hard to create connections, especially where there are communities and people who want some help when it comes to freedom of expression.
Exactly. Secure communications over the internet have been paramount lately when it comes to both connecting and protecting people. Online groups associated with uprisings in Libya, Syria and further afield have been a focus point for organisations like Tor and Telecomics. Another plan currently in development is to address social activity on the internet, and the people involved hope to grow their network from the individual out rather than planning a preset ecosystem for people to set up inside. Heather Marsh is the spokesperson for Global Square Project, and we chatted about how it should work.
Global Square is a new environment for social and organizational communication. There's a new system of IDs and profiles for your individual security, and from there we will go up to create communication between individual profiles, and from there tools for people to work together and organize together, and eventually creating systems such as the News Commons and the global market where people will work and organize their lives and their governance. So from the cellular structure all the way up, we're starting with the user profiles first of all.
To try and visualise what we're talking about here, is this sort of a matter of, say, building something akin to a social media profile, but under secure conditions, and then to be able to connect from there?
Yes, it's starting with the individual instead of the system. So instead of building a Facebook system, we start with the actual individual. For me, what's happened to the internet is exactly like what's happened to our democracy in general. In democracy, that very, very poorly defined term, and nobody can quite agree what it means. One thing most people do agree is that there will be a certain segment of the population that will be able to participate en masse in their own governance, right, as individuals. And what happened in reality is that was deemed not functional. People had work to do and they couldn't travel, and it was too awkward to have everybody participating in everything. So we ended up with this black box governance system where nobody's quite certain what happens in it, and the individual voices aren't happening at all. And the reason that democracy was so exciting all over the world was the individual participations and the individual power. And to me, the internet is the perfect symbol for that. It's exactly the same thing that's happened there. You know, anybody that's ever sat in front of a dumb terminal waiting for the mainframe to decide that you could have the resources or the data that you needed to perform your job, it was so frustrating. And when the internet first appeared, or it was first conceived, it was so exciting, because you were going to have all that autonomous control. You were going to be able to do everything all by yourself. You were going to have control over your own environment, but you could still communicate with everybody. If you had a big project to work on, you could share resources. The internet, the reason it was so exciting is because it really was democracy. It was the exact same concept, and the exact same thing has happened to it. People have said, well, it's much more convenient if we go through these servers, and if we give all this control over to these external parties, it will be so much more efficient. Exactly like they did with democracy. And people, as they always do, if someone says they're going to take care of you and do all the hard work for you, we're all for it, right? And the exact same thing has happened. Now we're finding our communications are completely controlled. Our data is not our own. It's a perfect symbol for what's happened in real life, what's happened online. So we want to get that part right first. We want to work in a peer-to-peer environment where we start with individual security and individual power first.
In which case, if you're making the individual look after themselves to a certain extent, Is it a hard sell to make people do this? Because, I mean, they could try and access, dark web or try and navigate the internet in ways that are not maybe as user-friendly, but mean that you have a bit more control. But it's seen as being very difficult.
That's why we're working with Tribler from TU Delft. They are what they call a fourth-generation peer-to-peer tool, and they're very advanced. They're a beautiful system. They have a beautiful interface. They're fast. Their spam control is much better than anything we've seen before. They work on a sort of a Reddit model where channels are voted up or voted down depending on the user feedback, so the spam disappears off the bottom. It's a beautiful system. We think it is very user-friendly. We think it's going to be as easy for people to use as it would be for them to use Twitter and all the rest of it, but without the loss of control. So we feel that it's what we always wanted, it's what the internet was always supposed to be, and we're at the point now where there's no excuse to not have it.
Now, the main problem, obviously, when it comes to designing a system like this is that the good comes with the bad along the way. Now, you're hoping that a system like this would work so that people who are interested in good things can communicate and also look after themselves. But if a system like this, decentralized, is out there and it is harder to censor or to stop, that also means it's quite hard to stop things like child pornography, abusive imagery, anything which may be harmful to a society. So how would you manage that kind of material?
I would disagree completely with the premise. First of all, I don't believe it's harder to stop. I believe it's much easier to stop. Because if you look at the way we're doing it right now, where, the whole entire governments of, for instance, Australia and New Zealand have these giant firewalls that prevent anybody from accessing anything that the government decides they don't want them to access, which included sites like ones that were printing WikiLeaks cables and everything back last year, nothing to do with child pornography, most of them. But if you have the government doing something like that for you, acting as a parental figure and trying to find all the sites that might possibly be offensive, the government is a very few people. The people who are really combating child pornography on the internet are anonymous. They are legion. They're everywhere. If anybody can find child pornography in a peer-to-peer network or on the internet or anywhere else, then everybody can find child pornography. And those who want to shut it down, as in anonymous, and right-thinking people, which there are far more right-thinking people than there are people who want to look at child pornography, will shut it down and will do a much better job of it than the government ever could. And that was, again, the original concept of the internet. Parental controls were originally put to be implemented by the users themselves. They were not supposed to come from some centralized authority originally. And that's what we would like to go back to, because no government can ever do the job that we could do ourselves.
The example there with child pornography is an extreme end, and hopefully right-thinking people, as you say, the majority of people would not agree with that kind of material being spread. But there's also the chance that a government or an authority may disagree with something that most people think is okay, but they might wish to block this. How does Global Square circumvent this if it's running on telecoms? Because obviously, say here in the UK, telecoms companies can find ways to stop you using the internet, so it can be blocked at that level. Does Global Square work around this?
Well, that would be a confrontation that we expect to have one day, probably sooner than later. And, they control your broadband, they control your access, they do. And as Johan, the director of the Tribler project, has said, the only way to shut it down is to shut down the internet. And I expect that confrontation probably will happen. But, what you're coming up to then is if all of the people agree that this is a good idea and the government says it isn't, we have a slight problem with the governance then, don't we?
When would people be able to try and make their identity to then start to progress from there?
The end of March is our goal. We are a part of the Berlin exposition at the Biennale. It starts on April 27th, and we need to have something up and running by then. So it's a short time frame. And at that point, it would be the cells swimming in the ocean, being able to communicate with each other and have their own little space. But it would progress very quickly from there, I think.
Are you still also looking for people who can work on this? Because there's some technical skills required to try and make this work, and maybe many hands will make lighter work. Are you still calling out for coders to help?
Absolutely, and we're working with an awful lot of people. There are a lot of people who have seen in the last year everything that's wrong with the system. The way the internet has been going since the beginning has been problematic for a lot of us. But, in the last year, exactly last year, in February, as I'm sure you remember being in the media, what it was like when all of the footage was coming out from the Day of Rages, the Domino Day of Rages, and people were risking their lives to get YouTube footage, and they would put it up on YouTube and it would be down 20 minutes later because somebody would have reported it as offensive content. And, you know, people have really realized since that time that we need alternatives and we need them urgently. So there have been a lot of people working on a lot of different projects. And we are all getting together and talking. And there's a big organizational task ahead of us, yes.
All right, then, if we'd like to either offer skills or come and take a look, where can we best find you online to find out more?
globalsquare.org.
A new possibility for secure social web there with Heather. What about updating humans? I'm intrigued by this. Jamila, what would you add if you could embed or attach a form of technology?
You know, I'm struggling not to say lasers. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It would be quite good, wouldn't it?
It would be quite cool.
But, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe a better memory would be nice. And, you know, or an exoskeleton. I think I've always wanted to try one of those. What about you, Giles?
Yeah, an exoskeleton and lasers would be cool. But better memory is probably more practical.
Well, it might sound like the stuff of science fiction, but various forms of augmentation are already with us. And the future of how it works, who gets to use it, and what is safe bears some careful consideration. It's good to know that tucked up in the French Alps next month, a mix of specialists will be thinking about, presenting on and discussing just that at the Augmented Human Conference. Jean-Marc Seigneur is a researcher at the University of Geneva, and he told me all about this event.
We try to combine augmented reality research with sport research, medical research, and also researchers from philosophy and ethics, because all these augmented human technologies impact the human, and we need to think not only about the technical parts, but also the impact on the human in the long term.
I guess there is a temptation when people talk about an augmented human to immediately run down the path of science fiction and think Terminator, this is going to be the future of what humans will be. But already we augment ourselves, whether it is new hip joints or pacemakers or even breast implants, whether it's cosmetic or whether it's functional. But are we actually moving towards ways where the human population accepts an augmented society, that it's actually a more normal thing?
As you say, we have been augmented already by a number of equipments and technologies, but now we are moving toward a world where these equipments are even more numerous and more connected. In this way, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I don't know if you read the new book from Alan Dean Foster's Human Blend. In his book, he discusses like actually a science fiction world where humans are augmented. But what we have found in the last years with this conference is that it's really now becoming popular and more technologies available. And so the idea is really to discuss them from a technical point of view, to advance the technologies, but also discuss the impact in the long term with also philosophers and researchers in ethics and so on.
And as well as discussing the engineering of augmenting a human body, are there also discussions about the social theory? Because even when it comes to Medicare or healthcare in some countries, the rich may be more may be able to access healthcare, and poorer people maybe not so much. So would an augmented human run along similar lines? Because it'd be quite expensive today if I wanted to get a new leg or, you know, have a hand replaced. This kind of technology is still fairly new and still being developed, but it seems quite far away for the average human being.
That's true that these technologies they have a cost. However, at the moment, they are better and better to be used by disabled people to improve their capabilities that they might have lost. So from this point of view, I mean, I still hope that we will have in many countries in the world sufficient money to help people who have been injured or who are disabled to improve their capabilities with this kind of technologies. Then after, when you think about more like people who are not disabled, who use these capabilities and these new technologies to improve their capabilities, that's less important that it is available for all humans, because it's also like only maybe to improve their performance, some sport situations or like experiences they want to enjoy. That can also be used to improve your professional capabilities, so extend your memory, and then it's sure that you have an edge. You might have an edge if you use these technologies and you are wealthy enough to buy them and to use them compared to other humans.
Now, it's been proven, obviously, that physical adaptation can work for people, whether it's a new heart pump or a new limb, but can the brain cope with all of these new methods of input? If we head towards a world where there's a lot of different types of augmentation, do we end up wondering if the human mind may be slightly overloaded?
It might get overloaded, but you might have a technology that will help increasing the capacity of the brain. Most of these technologies are transparent to the user. It's important that extend their capabilities, but in an easy way. For example, by using exoskeletons, you just have to think about you move, you do the movements that you usually do. And transparently, the armor, the exoskeleton, will follow your movements. Most of the time, those technologies, they are transparent. Then it's kind of not overloading the user.
When the future comes about where you can choose, what would you aim for if you are augmenting yourself? Yeah.
Me? There are many interesting interfaces. I think brain computing interfaces, their cost is decreasing a lot, and maybe between 5 years to 10 years time, there will be very interesting interfaces used. I think that it would help me a lot to have an easier interfacing with computers and other equipments. I think that's one of the technologies I like at the moment, and I think could really be more widespread in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, if we'd like to maybe try to attend or indeed find some more information or follow along online once the event is going, where's best to find you online?
It's augmentedhuman.com. And if you type on Google Augmented Human conference, I think you should find it.
Thanks to Jean-Marc, and I look forward to finding out what happens at the conference. Maybe soon I'll be able to download that sort of information straight into my brain.
And you wouldn't just fill your brain with lolcats and robot unicorns.
This I cannot guarantee. But what I can say is that we've run out of time again, and I don't have an app for that. However, you can always get in touch and let me know what's lighting your digital fire, or if there's something neat that you're working on that we should know about. Tweet at me on Twitter, where we are BBC_Outriders, or indeed find us on Facebook and Google+, just by searching for Outriders there.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk